Good day. It is a surprise how sometimes we live in historical moments and we don't even notice it. History has many forms. History sometimes is slow, it just evolves, and next thing you know, there's a new historical change. But sometimes history can also be very violent and very painful in its change when it's bringing about change. History transforms society. We see how societies get transformed. And now we also see how societies rise and sometimes societies decline. Why am I giving this long intro? Well, right before our eyes, we are seeing the preeminence of one society that has lasted over 300 to 500 years, shaped the world, given the world the context and the contours and the nature of as we know it. We are seeing that reality slowly fade away in its preeminence and its power and its glory. What am I talking about here? I'm talking about the sunset that is falling on the European continent. Europe used to be the preeminent continent as regards to technology. They are the ones who embarked on discovery. They found through the Renaissance, they found the whole civilizations of Greece and Rome. They were the ones that gave the world the Industrial Revolution and the ones that also moved and through maritime excellence discovered America, discovered Africa, discovered the New World. Europe shaped the world. And individual countries in Europe have their own hand to play in it. We know of the Dutch, they played a role in Southeast Asia. We know of the Germans, they also played a role. We know of the French, they played a role, but none among the European nations shaped the world more than the British. They gave us America, gave us most of the colonies and countries we have in Africa, and they gave us English as a language that is spoken by over 1 billion people all over the world. But it's sad to say that the eminence and preeminence and the eminent power of Europe, right before our eyes, we are seeing Europe go through a period of decline that is accelerating into irrelevance. Good day and welcome to my channel, Ebimo Amungo's Perspective on Global Affairs. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe. If you have any comment regarding the opinion I express in my video, please leave them in the comment section. But do well to like and share. There is a German industrialist who made a very weighty statement recently. He said to the effect that Germany may soon be a province of China. What he was saying is because he made this statement simply because the Chinese are preeminent as regards to the supply chains for almost everything that is needed in the world now. So Stefan Schroe, the boss of AMG Lithium, says Europe must become more self-sufficient in critical raw materials and new technologies. If you ask me, that's wishful thinking. That boat has sailed away. China is the new place where everybody goes to get whatever they want. China is the new Rome. But Europe's problem is not just only China, it's not just only, it is America. You see, Europe has had a long history with America. Europe helped forge and form America through the different immigrations into America from Germany, from England, from France. We have the American states, Sweden, Norway. They all took their own part of America. And later on, they brought in the slaves. that helped in building the America that we know today. And for the past 80 years, Europe and America has had a partnership, if for nothing else, in expanding and developing the concept of democracy and staving off the concept of communism and all the ideologies that ran counter to what the Western neoliberal thinkers believe should be how the world should be, which is free enterprise, democracies, and all that they want, the globalists have been trying to sell us in the past years. But the globalists had their own hand in shaping the new reality we see today. Because Europe had formed a new dependency in sourcing materials and skills and all kinds of supplies of things cheaper from other areas, while they also sold away their competencies, changed the structure of their economies, financialized their economies, and today all that gave them an advantage is no more. We all know that the Industrial Revolution started in Europe, but it is no more so. Europe can hardly produce most of the things it used to produce. So in its relationship with America, it has had a long one, but now America has become one of the factors and the forces that is squeezing Europe. President Donald Trump is a new reality that the Europeans did not contend with. He has broken free. He feels that the Europeans have been having a free ride at the expense of Europe. The Europeans also have had the fact that they started a war with Russia under the framework of NATO and EU and precipitated their demise through sanctions that they placed on the Russian state and all the activities they tried to do in trying to break off relationship with Russia, who had been a big supplier of materials and energy to them. Then there's China, who now outpaces Europe through innovation and also manufactures at more efficient and cheaper rates than the Europeans could ever dream of doing. So this is how I see it. I see a situation where Europe is now seriously in decline. Europe is being squeezed from two ends by the realities that they did not foresee coming, and now they are being precipitated. That decline is being precipitated by the actions that is confronting them. The first one is America. America is precipitating the decline of Europe in no small measure. Europe has always had the fact that they were part of the NATO group and they were part of an affiliation that, one, projected the power, collective power, but also pacified the European continent. I had said in various videos that no group of people on earth are as cantankerous, warsome, warmongering, and warlike than the Europeans. Every single language is a cause for a war. If it is not the French fighting the English, it is the Dutch fighting the Belgians. It had always been like that. But when American presence had been on the European continent for the past 80 years, that tendency to be quarrelsome and to be at each other's throat had practically been managed over these years. And now Donald Trump is stating and indicating that the NATO framework does not benefit America and he wants to leave. He wants America to pull out. That has started creating new tensions and new pressures and new worries for the Europeans. And we are seeing this. When you take the individual European countries and disaggregate them, Britain is really, really in a bad place. Britain has an army of 75,000 people. They can barely fill into Highbury Stadium or Wembley Stadium. They do have one or two aircraft carriers and they try to puff their chest and say they have an army that is big and a military that is big. But it's what they have is history and glories of past days. The French themselves have tried to, through their their theory of being sovereign, they have an air force, they build their own military equipment, they have cutting-edge nuclear submarines, and for that, they really have been trying to keep pace. But in the scale of things now, the French are minuscule when it comes to us military power. The Germans just left military build-up, and it is only now. Boris Pistorius, the German Minister of Defense, is already saying that Germany is moving towards improving its military might, and they are going to invest $25 billion in moving that forward. They will have new tanks, over 2,000 of them, and they will build new machinery, increase their arsenal and weaponry, and then also start conscription. They've even threatened that if voluntary conscription does not take place, they would force a conscription, a voluntary. If you don't join the army voluntarily, then they will force a conscription. They are also trying to increase their army from a miserly 70,000 to 100,000 or 200,000 personnel. Because the reality now is that they are fighting, they feel that the Russians are a threat to them. The Russia now has over 1.5 million people in their army. They have fought the most modern war in wartime. They now know all the new modern war tactics. They have ballistic missiles. They have an arsenal, and they have military hardware that includes technology in aviation, in warplanes. They have the whole suite of them, but most importantly, they are the cutting edge of developing drones, modern day drones. So the Russians are way, way, way ahead of every European country, and for that, that's a threat to them. But the Germans, in trying to posture that they want to become a military force, is a problem, because Germany has always been a source of fear to all the other European countries because of their in their ability to become bigger, larger industrially and economically. But this reality is changing. And another source of worry for the Europeans now is the trade war being put on them by the American president, Donald Trump. Europe had always had the benefit of the American market. They always went in there. They sold Volkswagens in large numbers. They sold their French wine. They sold their Spanish products, and they sold high fashion from Italy. They always had the American market because the American market was where everybody wanted to be in because of the strength of the American dollar and the fact that that market has the world's biggest consumer market. It's the world's biggest consumer market. But these days, Trump is saying tariff, and tariff is a problem to them. That means it will become harder for them to sell their products. They may be lucky because it's not as if they are being replaced. Champagne is not being replaced. Heineken and all these other beers are not being replaced. But American competitors are being groomed by Trump to challenge them. So that market is becoming squeezed. And for the Europeans also, they had found a new reality in China. While Americans will always say that their market is the best in the world, the Chinese have also developed a market because of the growing middle class in China. One of the things that happened recently is that the Chinese have become wealthier, and in becoming wealthier, they've developed new tastes. The amount of French wine sold in China, the amount of high fashion products from France, from Louis Vuitton, from all these countries, Spain, they are all high. Pork, particularly, a big agricultural produce that Chinese like is sold by the Spanish and in large numbers. China is now a market that rivals, if not even bigger than the American market. So the Chinese now have power when they also do the same thing America does regarding our market. They can sanction you from participating in their market. This we saw recently when we see that the Chinese have become so innovative. They spend so much money in research. Nobody does spend as much in research. Their automotive industry has become so big now. It's 30 million, and their cars are now the best in the world by miles. Now they are competing with the Europeans and taking market share from the Europeans in a market that the Europeans once dominated. Because it was the Europeans that came and built Volkswagen plants, built Ford plants, built Renault plants, built all these plants taught the Chinese how to build. And now the Chinese do better than them. And the Chinese are now transporting and shipping cars like BYD, MG, and so many other electric cars and even normal cars, normal ICE cars to the European market and taking market share from traditional European companies like Renault, especially the French companies and even the Italian companies. Now, as it comes to innovation, nobody meets up with the Chinese as regards to innovation. The Chinese are by far the most innovative in the world at this time. It has been reported severally in several reports that the Chinese now lead the world in innovation. The Americans and the Europeans definitely are doing catch up. It is not by accident that in this world we have a dichotomy as regards to digital economy. When you hear of Amazon, you have Alibaba. When you hear of TikTok, or if you hear of companies, any company you hear of in America that is in the digital space, you have its mirror image in China, Beidou, Tencent. You hear of TikTok, ByteDance, all these companies. But when it comes to Europe, there's no equivalence. Europeans are not part of the digital economy. They just don't have those kind of digital champions as America, like Facebook, Google. When you hear of Google, you hear of Baidu. When you hear of, there's just no equivalence for the Europeans. So it's just the Chinese that can stand up in this particular space. But if that is not even enough, let us go into the infrastructural advantages that the Chinese present and makes it such a problem to Europe now. By miles, China is the greatest producer of electricity because out of 30 tetrawatt hours produced globally every year, China produces 10. America produces only 5. China is now producing more energy from renewables like solar and wind energy by far more than all the other countries combined. This year alone, China broke a world record in solar energy generation. They are transiting and improving their energy mix to the point where now you see that they are moving towards renewables, more closer towards renewables. So the per capita expenditure for power in China is by far less than it is in Europe. Meanwhile, the Chinese have built road networks, almost 200,000 miles of road networks, highways, almost 50,000 miles of high-speed rails. They have rail lines already of 150,000. Their infrastructure is so advanced. Even in ports like that in Tianjin, they have ports that are autonomous. We're talking about a situation where the containers are being moved by robots. That's the kind of the biggest ports in Shanghai, the biggest port in Tianjin and everything. So the infrastructure that China presents has become a competitive advantage for China, that doing business in Europe is now much more costlier than doing business in China. And all this is now making the Chinese and the Chinese become attractive to European companies, especially German companies, where big industrial firms like that need a lot of energy are moving slowly towards China and towards America. This pressure is destroying Europe. In front of us, we are seeing that Europe is losing the economic battle. They are losing the military battle. They are losing everything that made them powerful. We see and hear of all the posturing of European leaders like Ursula von der Leyen, but these days, anytime you say sanctions against the Chinese will throw a counter sanction that will hit you so hard. The Australians learned the hard way. When one Australian prime minister accused China of being the originator of COVID, Chinese retribution was very hard. They banned Australian wine, they banned Australian ore, they found new markets to get most of the products that Australia used to sell to them, and it took a new prime minister to make peace with China, Albanese. This is the power China now holds, and this is the power that is squeezing the Europeans, and they have nothing. They are now caught in a good place and a bad place. They sell and have a market in China, but they also have a major competitor in the Chinese firms that are very cutthroat in their ability to do business. So when you see what's going on now, nothing has shown us the decline or precipitated the decline of the Europeans more though than the Russia-Ukraine war. This is a war where we see madness and self-harm perpetrated and inflicted upon the Europeans by themselves. Access to gas that used to make them competitive, they chose to cut off. And even in the markets that control finance, where because the European economy, especially that of Britain and even Germany, is highly financialized, they choose to damage the trust in their financial system by seizing Russian assets. But if nothing frightened them more is the fact that they helped to create and spark innovation and self-reliance in the Russians, and the Russians now have taken their markets that they used to sell in, chase them away, replace their cars, replace their automotive products, replace their goods to a large extent, but not completely. Now they have a competitor in Russia, where once they had a collaborator and a partner. These are not good times for the Europeans. And it is the reality we are seeing slowly as we're watching history take us into a period where Europe is slowly falling into decline. And we're watching it in front of us here now. These days, the images we get out of Europe are demonstrations on the streets, street demonstrations. We see politicians that posture. We see politicians that are possessed by only one agenda, an agenda to support Ukraine. They have no other agenda. From Keir Starmer to Macron to Frederick Miles, anytime we see them in front of the TV, they're addressing people or addressing delegates or addressing politicians or addressing even their own parliament, it's always about Ukraine. They've lost it. They have nothing again to offer. And that's the kind of leadership that is driving Europe into one season, one period, one era of decline, far, far from the heights of world dominance and world domination that they once had. This is where I end my video for today. If you have any comments regarding the idea I just expressed here, please leave them in the comment section. If you are new to this channel, please subscribe. Do well to like and share. Thank you very much. Until I see you in my next video.